Here we go. Let's get into it. This is what I'm going to call the fishing topic. Now, I don't know how long, again, I'm going to get into this, but it's something that I think I don't necessarily, it's a topic that I touch a lot on, like history and stuff like that. I always bring a lot of history to it, and I try to do my research and get multiple sources and things like that. And I think that when me and Tim record, this is like a species by species topic. But for me, coming here now and just talking to myself, talking to you, the audience, asking you to engage, which, by the way, I totally am asking you guys to do. Please go over to X and hit us up. We're at just look Real AF TV, real like Fish and Reel. Look us up on X, Instagram. If you go to realaf.tv, then there is a contact page. It's actually realaf.tv/contact. You can email us directly through the contact form there. YouTube comments, that's a great way to go about getting in touch with us. We watch these things, and this episode, without Tim there for the back and forth, I'm really going to ask you as the audience, as the listener, to hit us up, because even though Tim's sick, so sick that he can't, that he's too tired to record, his voice is all fucked up. He just didn't think it would be a good idea to be on the mic, that he will see the comments and all that shit on social media. So please interact with me on this episode, and we're going to interact back with you. So the topic, ancient fish. It's just that generic. Recently in an episode, Tim had mentioned that there was and I'm forgetting his exact example, but he was like, there's a longer distance between the Stegosaurus and the T-Rex than there was between the T-Rex and man, as like Homo sapiens. It was something to that effect. And I was like, I did know that. I just forget the exact terminology. So it is surprising to hear every time. Like I forget the exact species references. And it made me think, holy shit, that's right. There were a ton of fish. There was a lot of water and things like that. And there are, sharks and other things like that that have a fossil record that goes way back. So specifically what I did is I looked up the Jurassic period because of the popularity of Jurassic Park. Just the thought, the word Jurassic brings up a thought, right? In the majority of Americans. And so I looked up the Jurassic period, and it said that this goes from 201.3 million years to 145 million years ago. That's huge. And that is such an incredibly long time ago. We're talking about, well, this goes back to the Jurassic Park references quick, because Triceratops, T-Rexes, the like sort of main features of Jurassic Park, they're not even from the Jurassic period. So judge it for what you will, but Jurassic's the coolest fucking word out of all these time periods. So of course you're going to name your book and movie Jurassic Park. But the point that I'm trying to get to here is the Jurassic Park or the Jurassic era, you will probably recognize, you will probably recognize names like the Brachiosaurus, the Apatosaurus, the Stegosaurus. These are probably dinosaurs that you recognize, and these are Jurassic period dinosaurs. Now, we're a fishing podcast and we're talking about ancient fish. We actually talked about, me and Tim, we had an episode we titled Dream Fish, and we talked about our dream fish. Like, what is our dream fish to catch, to hunt, to go after? If we could get one, it would be a big deal. This was episode 18, and now we're in the 70s, pushing 80. I don't know what I'm going to number this one. So we'll just say we're over 80 total episodes, including our specials. But this was all the way back in episode 18, where we talked about our dream fish and like what we would like to catch and things like that. And I had said the sturgeon, which is still true now, for me at least. I haven't caught one. I would love to go fishing for a sturgeon. And if you got any hot spots, here it is. Here's the interaction where I encourage you. Let's come hit us up. Hit us up. Contact us. Leave a comment. Because I have sort of always just loved the idea of catching this fish. I think part of it is its size. I think that I have a grander idea of the fish hunting and catching process than what it would actually be, because not all sturgeons are so huge that they just flop on the bottom and you got to fight them for hours, right? I don't even know if I could fight one for hours anymore. But the idea that this thing is kind of shark-like, I think, has gotten me. The fact, I think Tim brought it up in episode 18, the fact that this thing is so ancient looking, I know that particular fish, maybe, 10 or 15 years old or something like that they don't get much older than that it still has that lineage, that it still goes back that far. We're talking like gar. They're not the ones that set this off. One of the main ideas was the arapemia. Man, I fucking tried to memorize that one. Not even memorize it. I know that one, but now I'm trying to read it and I'm fucking it up. it's like, that's like what I do. I know this name. Arapamia. So the gar, the arapamia, sturgeons, the coelacanths, these are all fish that have fossil records that go back to the Jurassic era, 200 million, 145 million years ago. And the idea for this came from the arapamia because they're so huge, and we're going to do an episode on just those fish. But to sum it up, is they're Amazon fish. And these fish are gigantic. I mean, they're huge. They are absolutely massive, and a great protein source. And they've been around forever. They have these really thick, hard, like they're armored. That'd be one way to put it. And so I kind of have this infatuation with like these armored fish, because all these armored fish have this like ancient fossil record typically to them. I know the sturgeon isn't one of those hard scaled ancient type fish, but it has that shark background, like I kind of started this topic with. It has that sort of shark scale to it, it has that feel of being ancient and old because it's tied back to something like sharks that have been around for so long. But the arapar, oh my god, here I go again. Arapayama. Arapamia. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. But it's like a red, greenish fish, has has this really ancient tale. You know, I feel like dragons are kind of modeled after this fish, and there are different versions, different types of this fish, you know, like in Asia and Australia and stuff like that. They go by different names. Again, we're probably going to end up doing a full podcast on this. I mean, it's such a interesting fish that I just don't see how it couldn't come up fairly soon. But the point is that this fish, you know, has been one of those that interests me because of its size, its elusiveness in a way, its location in the Amazon, which is almost always a difficult place to go fish, and uh, the way that I've heard it spoke about on nature programming has always been that it's armored, it's tough, and it's not only tough from the fact that it's basically wearing armor in its scales, but that it's muscular, like the shape that it is, where its head and body are almost like one single thing. It, now it has this point on it. You know what? I'm gonna stop. I'm getting too far into this fish specifically. And I don't want to get into this fish specifically. I want to keep talking about fish. Like I want to talk about ancient fish in general and my interest in them and how we will definitely be covering them species by species, you know, as they pique our interest in future episodes. So the idea that there are these ancient fish that are still swimming around today, or these fish that are not ancient in age as a single fish, but ancient in lineage, right? Where you can sort of trace this back so far, and that they have this like really armored and like, I don't know, what am I trying to say? Like they have this strength about them that is just uh, super interesting, and that I want to get my hands on it to just feel that power to feel the power of that fish, and like uh sort of what it brings to the ecosystem and what it's brought to the ecosystem for what is literally millions of years. It's fucking crazy. So I, as somebody out there listening to this podcast right now, and I hope you're hanging in there with me, I want to ask you guys to go over to realaf.tv/contact and email us, and go over to YouTube and hit us up in the comments and stuff like that, and say whether this is something that interests you or not. Because though sometimes these fish are food, they're more often trophy catches, or almost like a a trophy. Even if you release them, right? It's about the story, the experience. That's a better way to put it. It's about the experience leading up to catching that fish, and the catching of the fish, and the release and the safe release of the fish, and everything. Like the catch of the fish is the climax, and the release and safe, watching the fish swim away during release is, you know, the closure to the story. And I want to know if this is something that interests you personally, and how you kind of think of that. We have talked about it. Me and Tim have talked about how River Monsters, the TV show, does it and tells these stories. And we're not fans. I watch it. I've watched it. There's no doubt about that. I think it's interesting. I think it's great that that show exists, because it allows for someone like me to know that these fish exist, and that I can go and learn about them in a different way. That show is too dramatic. It has commercial breaks in it that shouldn't exist because it creates. I'm going off on a production note here, and I realize that now. So I'm just going to stop. And I am going to say, I want to talk with you, the community of Real AF TV, about ancient fish. I want to hear your guys' feedback. I want to hear your fishing stories. One, two, I want to hear your thoughts around this of catching these fish, because sometimes these fish are so big, and it's just that they get that big. I don't mean that I don't mean that they're ancient in age, the ones that you can actually go out and hook right now. What I mean is these fish have been around for millions of years, and they lived in a time where they may have been the small fish, but now they're the big fish. They're the gigantic fish, right? And if we have these giant fish and we are catching them and we have to use these new modern methods to catch them, what is your thought about what we're doing to exhaust them to even get them on the shore, on the boat, and then try to safely release them, knowing that this may or may not, for like sturgeon for sure, I can speak to, have sort of limited reproductive capabilities. That's not really the word I'm looking for, but they can be somewhat endangered. I'll just say it that way, that they can be somewhat endangered. And so, sport catching these fish and letting them go and exhausting them and wearing them out. I want to hear your thoughts about that, because I'd still do it. I would still totally do it. Like, I would catch and release a sturgeon. I would catch and eat a sturgeon where it's legal. It's back to the sort of story with the news, where there are departments of natural resource, there are DNRs across the country that are monitoring this stuff, and I believe in the work that they're doing. And so if it's legal for me to catch a sturgeon, I'm gonna catch it and I'm gonna eat it, even if 300 miles downriver it's considered endangered. I believe that if it's legal in my area, then they've done their work and they know that it's safe, to be putting them on the catch and eat list. So, yeah, I'd like to have that conversation. It'd be really cool to have you guys interact with that. So go over to realaf.tv/contact. You can email us directly, put a comment in the YouTube video. We'll get that too. And you know what? If you're $1 Patreon, there's DMs on Patreon. You just go back and forth on there. It's a sweet way to communicate. I do it with other Patreon subscriptions. You get right on there and you can message back and forth. And if I don't have them open, hit me up in a comment on YouTube. Tell me to go open them up on Patreon. I need to make sure that they're open. So I don't have too much more on this ancient fish. I just really wanted to put this episode out there. This sort of like one-way conversation that would hopefully spark a two-way conversation. If that makes any sense. It's got to make sense. Makes sense in my head. Hope it makes sense in yours. Again, I am going to do a random take here. So, let's talk about ancient fish and let's see where that discussion goes, because I would like to really talk about it with people in the fishing community. I think it's a fascinating topic, as someone who is I don't want to say obsessed with history, but like thoroughly enjoys history, and especially crazy things like this, as I start to discover what we're doing now to kind of sustain gar populations and help the sturgeons come back and stuff like that. It's very interesting to me. So let's, again, short one. Don't know how this time is going to work. We're working it out. We always do live to tape stuff. So I'm just going to go ahead right now. I'm going to kick it over to the random take. Sure, I'll put a break in here. Why not? Hit the break.